Happy Friday, everybody. Shall we start? With something lecture, the moment we've all been waiting for the whole week. I can't wait until this lecture. The attendance register. In the spirit of tradition, we'll start out with student questions and answers. I have a really exciting one today. I felt the energy propagating through the electronic mail on this one. I felt it. Maybe you guys will feel it too when you hear me read this question. Yeah. It's not only questions, it's also comments. This question comes, well, the subject is questions about database from Cardiff CDT. So there are some students taking this class that are at Cardiff University and some more at Bristol University. That's how much in demand this module is. This module is in massive demand. And unfortunately for Cardiff and Bristol, they don't have somebody to teach that there. It says, Dear Professor Laramie, we started looking on the assignment and we have no idea which data are the correct data that we should use. We tried to open the supplementary data you uploaded and they have too many categories and subcategories and we have no idea which of the information are useful. We watched the tutorial on Tableau, but the data there are very simple. Furthermore, most of the tools have issues to computers that are not running Windows. Could you please give us some direction on how to reduce the data and which of them are the one we need? So that's the email. Did everybody feel the energy? Like the stress? Whoever. Huh? I can feel the energy from this. So I guess I'm going to do more than just answer this question. I'm going to respond to some of the comments. One thing I would like to point out, though, is that the Tableau demo and tutorial, that data is not trivial, actually. It has something like 26 dimensions, and it has 140,000 rows. So the data set is actually bigger than I believe than this one. So it's a non-trivial data set, but I do agree it's a little bit less complicated than the one we're looking at now. So I guess let's look briefly at one of the files. I've renamed some of the files to include more of the health challenges that are measured. So this one is cancer, epilepsy, Down's syndrome, and hyperthyroidism. So let's look at this for a second. And you might remember, some of you that are really psychic might remember saying, as soon as you download the data, you're going to get a little shock. Does anybody remember me saying that? So that was the little shock. However, once the initial shock has subsided, it's not as bad as it looks. You know, it's not so bad. So let's just look at it for a second. In the left column, you have a practice code, right? That's a unique identifier for every NHS service where the data is being measured, right? And then in the second column, you have CCG name. Now, we have lots of NHS services in the UK. Did anybody count the number of rows there are? Does anybody know? 7,000-ish. Okay. Now, each of those 7,000-ish are put into a CCG. That's called a clinical commissioning group. So they're grouped together into 209 groups called CCGs. So that's what that second column is. What CCG group are you in? So there are the practices. Now, if I want to find out, like I see a practice ID, if I want to find out what is that practice, I just click on practice addresses right there. And there's the ID again. So the ID gives you a description of what is that place. This one is a surgery. This is where it's located, and this is its postcode. And then I can go back here and I can look. Now I see, for example, cancer prevalence at the top. So we know that we're counting patients that have been diagnosed with cancer, right? In this part. And it's divided up into different years. So this is the year 2009 and 10, 2010, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 12, 20, 2013, 2014. Right? It's still not too difficult to understand. Then there's a value. That's the number of people being counted for that given NHS practice. And then there are these, this is a little bit confusing here, lower CI and upper CI. Those are confidence intervals. So that's trying to measure the uncertainty associated with the data, like how certain are we? What's the lower bounds of correctness on this value, the preceding value, and what's the upper bounds? That's what those CIs are. And a little bit, so what would I do if I was starting out? If I was starting out this assignment, what would I do? I would recommend, for example, I think I would create some different spreadsheets from this one. I would modify this spreadsheet, for example. And I think I would just create a version that deletes all the confidence interval columns. I think I would just delete those. Right? You can still have them in a bigger spreadsheet, but to start with this one, I think I would just create versions that delete the confidence intervals. You can look at those if you want, but to begin with, I think they just add unnecessary complexity. The next thing I would do is I would read more about what the data actually is. So there's an indicator metadata. So it describes what's in each column in more detail. Like, what is that thing being measured? Why is it being measured? Why is it so important? Right? It provides a definition, right? Definitions of learning disabilities, hyperthyroidism, and so on. Right? The value, what is that value that's being recorded in the value column? Right? What does that mean? Why is it being collected? Where did the data come from? Look, there's even data like where to get more if you want more of it, and so on. So it just says like what, it's a description of what's stored in the spreadsheet, how it was collected, what it means. So I would definitely read that. Question?
How do you compare two values with different units? Like some of them are just like thousands, so
Yep.
some of them are a percentage.
That's a very good question. What's your name?
Priya.
Priya. Can you ask that again when I'm finished with this one? So that's another thing I would do. I would look at this, and then the third thing I would do is create some very simple visual designs. I would create a bar chart, and I would create a line chart of cancer values, for example, versus NHS practice. I would create bar charts, line charts, bubble charts, pie charts. I wouldn't submit them for the assignment, but I would still create them just to get my initial view of the data, to get the tools working, whatever tools I choose, right? And I can still compare my simple visual designs with the more complicated ones that I make later. If you can make a line chart, then you can make an area chart very easily, and that is something you can put in the assignment. Right? And there's another comment in there about tools being, tied to the Windows platform. One thing is the Tableau tutorial is actually given on the Mac, so it's not tied to Windows. If we go to this amazing web page where that's recommended in the assignment, it's the collection of tools, right? And I'm sure a lot of people notice this. There are different filters. So you can filter these tools, by different properties. So here are all the web-based tools, for example, right? And there are over 200 of them. So if you want to find a web-based tool that's platform independent, you can just look at those, right? And not worry about a specific operating system. And I hope I answered that first question in a way that's satisfactory. Hopefully this Cardiff student will let me know if he's satisfied or not satisfied with that answer. But I hope that helps. Maybe. Say your name again? Priya. You said, how can you compare values with different units? Anybody else wondered about that? Any statisticians here? There's a standard answer for that. And the answer is you normalize the values. So instead of expressing them in their specific units, you express them as percentages. Like 99% of people, and if I have 10 million people, but I want to compare them with, I don't know, some other unit like the milligrams of vitamin A they get in their diet or something, you can normalize both of the scales or the numbers you're using from 0 to 100% and express them as percentages, and that makes them fit on the same visual design. It's very convenient. It's kind of a standard strategy. That makes sense? Now I know what you're thinking, because I have psychic powers and they're working today. What do you mean normalize the values? How do you do that? Anybody know the answer to that question? Indigo? It sounds like you have the right idea. You just divide all the values by their maximum. So whatever the maximum is, you find that maximum value, and then you divide all of them by that value, and they'll be normalized. So the maximum value divided by itself is 1, and that represents 100%. And the minimum value is usually 0. So if you divide 0 by the maximum value, you get 0, which is 0%. And then you have everything in between. Any other exciting questions? Everybody sign the attendance register? There has never been a better time to be a student than now. Never. The amount of information at your fingertips is never been this great. And that's true about this module too, definitely.